Good morning. My name's Thad Lathrop. I'm the interim lead pastor here at CIV, and I'm glad that you could join us as we are continuing on in our Fruitfulness through Faithfulness message series, where we're looking at how to manage money God's way. We wanted to start out 2025 with a series on money because it's in just about every situation or circumstance that we face. Even when it's not the most important consideration, it's still involved in whatever it is that we're facing. For instance, we probably don't think about it, but most of us were spending money right now, right? We've got electricity or air conditioning on. We've got electricity powering whatever device it is that we're watching this video on or filming this video. The meter is basically always running, and it's always running going out, but also coming in too if we're working or whatever's going on. Our personal financial situation is going to build and it's going to subtract over time based on the decisions that we make. And these decisions, they build on each other. So our ability to pay an unexpected bill that happens right now is going to be in part determined by how we have handled our finances over the last 6 months or a year or even more. It's very similar to growing a tree, right? That's why this is called fruitfulness through faithfulness. My grandpa had this incredible apple tree in his backyard. And the apples that he grew, they were huge and they tasted really good once you peeled off the skin because he used so much pesticides. But they were really good once you peeled off that skin. But it wasn't easy for him to grow the fruit, right? He battled the bugs with the pesticides. He also he tended to the tree constantly, pruning it. He had epic battles with birds who would try and come and steal his apples. And so he had stuff hanging all over the place to detract the birds from coming and getting the apples. There was just all kinds of work that he would do to tend to the tree. He would care for it for months and see no crop. And then finally there would be this crop of apples and we would get to eat them when we would go and visit. He knew the right things to do and then he did them. And the question for us is, what is the key to being fruitful in our finances so that we are using our money for the right things today to bring blessing for our life and for years to come? And the answer to that question comes from biblical wisdom. Biblical wisdom produces enduring blessing, riches, and honor. Take a look at Proverbs 3:13 and 16. It says, "Blessed is the one who finds wisdom and the one who gets understanding." And later in verse 16, wisdom is personified as a woman, and it says, "Long life is in her right hand, in her left hand are riches and honor." God promises blessing, riches, and honor to those who find wisdom. God has created life to work a certain way, and wisdom is learning God's ways and being able to apply them to a specific area of life or situation that we are facing. The wise are people who handle life God's way. My grandpa was a wise apple grower. He had knowledge of how to grow apples, and then he applied it to his specific situation and the challenges that he faced in his backyard. Our ability to experience blessings and riches and honor is going to depend on how we apply God's ways to our finances. And God has a lot of wisdom for us about finances. There's actually about 2,350 verses in the Bible related to money. That's more than faith and prayer combined. Why do you think that God included that many verses on money and possessions in the Bible? Well, I think one of the reasons is found in the Bible. In Matthew 6:21, it says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Our treasures, our money and our possessions are closely tied to our heart. And our hearts can easily be pulled towards focusing on things that are of lesser importance. It's amazing how we spend money and then we care so much about the thing that we spent money on. The more we spend, the more we care about that thing. I recently bought a new grill with some Christmas money that I had gotten to get a new grill with, and the winds picked up pretty shortly after I had bought that grill, and I was worried about it. I was worried about protecting it. Was it going to topple over? And then I came home this week, and Gina let me know that she had found the cover had blown off of the grill, and I was concerned, and I went out there to check on it and put the cover back on and get it all nice and tucked in so it wouldn't blow away with the wind. It's good to want to take care of the things that God has provided for us, but if we aren't careful, those things take a bigger and bigger piece of our heart, and we start to value them over what is truly important in life. And so wisdom is the ability to see life from God's angle, from His perspective, and then to apply it to our specific situation. It is both knowing the right thing and then doing the right thing. It's getting our hearts in the right position to be able to make good decisions when it comes to our finances. And when it comes to our finances, knowing the right thing and doing it, they're just two completely different things. I'm teaching a class to the high schoolers at our Impact Christian Academy homeschool co-op right now here at CIV that we have on Tuesdays, and it's called Foundations in Personal Finance. It's from Dave Ramsey, like the Financial Peace University group that we have is from him as well. It's his curriculum. And he is an expert in personal finance. He went bankrupt in his mid-20s, and since then he has learned how to apply biblical wisdom to finances. And he's come out of bankruptcy, and he has built an incredible company and a lot of wealth with it. One of the things that Ramsey says is personal finance is 80% behavior and only 20% head knowledge. What this quote demonstrates is, maybe the percentages aren't quite right, but what it demonstrates is that there are some important biblical principles to learn related to the area of finances, but our success when it comes to this area is going to come down more to our heart and our behavior than it is what we know about finances. And that's what we see. We see success in personal finances flows out of a heart of wisdom. Take a look at Proverbs 4:23 with me. Above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. The heart in this verse, it is our decision-making core. And it is saying that out of what we allow into our heart is going to come the wellspring of life. Or another way to say that practically is, out of what we allow into our heart is going to come our behavior. And I want to share a diagram with you to help us to see how our heart works before we get into the specific biblical wisdom on finances today. I want to share this with you because we can know all the right things about finances and still not find success with them, because if our heart is not right, then our behavior is not going to be right, and it's not going to lead towards wise choices. So take a look at this diagram with me of the heart that's talked about in Proverbs 4:23. You see on this diagram, we all have desires in our heart, and they're a mixed bag. They're positive, they're negative, and this is because we're just going to deal with this for the rest of our life on earth because of sin. And these desires, they are then filtered out. They are filtered into our perspective and values. And as it goes through that filter, then comes our behavior. Now, our perspective, that is how we think life really works. So last week, Pastor Matt talked about how being faithful in our work is doing lawful work. Well, this is work that doesn't violate God's law. So we hear that, right? But do we really believe that and think that's how life works? Because we could hear that and say, yeah, I think that's true. And then we go on through our week And we get to a point where to close a deal, we're going to have to tell a little bit of a lie. Not a big lie, but a little bit of a lie. And we know God's law says don't lie. It's one of the 12 commandments, one of the 10 commandments. We know it says not to lie, and so we think, well, this is how business works. So we tell a little lie to close the deal. See, in that scenario, we're saying, I know what God says, but this is how life really works. So our perspective is how we think life really works. Now, values are how we rank different areas of life. So what this would look like is, let's say you're in the market to buy a new car or buy a used car, because you can really afford a 2005 Honda Civic. But then you see Susie, she just purchased a 2025 Honda Civic. And so you say, I want to look as good as Susie does. And so you buy the 2025 Honda Civic, even though you can really only afford the 2005, because you want to look as good as she does. That's how these values work. Our value to look cool was higher than our desire to stay within our budget. This can play out in smaller financial decisions as well, like so-and-so got a new wardrobe. I want a new wardrobe. I want to look good as them. So we go spend money on clothes. Or, man, their kids always look good. I want my kids to look good. So we go buy them a new wardrobe. Now, I know that there's more values at play that go into buying your kids' clothes or your clothes or especially buying a car than just wanting to look good. But we're simplifying what we're talking about so we can get a clear picture. What does it look like to filter our what does it look like for our behavior to come out of our perspective and our values? So let's take a look again. Here's the heart diagram on the screen. And we're just simplifying to clearly articulate how this all works together. It's very important for us to be evaluating our perspectives and values often because they are driving our behavior. And this is especially important when it comes to finances because we're constantly bombarded with perspectives and values that are leading us to make unwise decisions financially. Right? When you scroll through social media, you might see somebody like this guy, this vacation travel influencer with 3 million followers. And we think, man, I want a break like this guy gets. Or you just see there's somebody always on vacation, right? And so in social media, and you think, man, they're getting a vacation and they are. Oh man, I want a vacation. So we go and spend more than we have on a vacation because we think we need it and we deserve it. Or take a look at this car ad, right? People are always so happy in car ads. They're getting a new car, but they don't show them 6 months later with their $555.95 payment for the next 5 years, and they're wondering, whoa, I shouldn't have done that, right? Or clothing ads are the same way, right? So happy. So cool looking and an extra 15% off as well. Man, that's going to lead to success and happiness. Or what about credit card commercials, right? They're always telling us what we need in our wallet, right? Like Capital One. Did you know that credit card companies spend $4 billion a year on advertising and marketing? They're not spending that kind of money out of the kindness of their heart. They are spending it because they want your business. They want to make money off of your purchases when you stop being able to pay for the balances on the credit card and they start charging you interest. So we have these industries that are spending billions of dollars selling us the perspective and values they want us to have so that we will buy their products, and they don't care if we can afford it or not. They just want our money. So it's important for us to guard our hearts by counteracting these messages with the truth in the Bible and fellowshipping with God's people so that they can help encourage us to handle our money God's way as well. So what are some of those 2,350 verses in the Bible about money that will lead to good financial fruit in 2025 and beyond? Let's take a look at how the wise follow God's ways with money by doing three things. They make a plan for now and the future, ensuring that they are living on less than they make, and then staying away from debt. Now, these are three principles that will help all of us to progress towards making and building wealth over time. So let's take a look at this first one, making a plan for now and the future. Take a listen to Proverbs 27, 23, and 24. It says, "Know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds. For riches do not last forever. And does a crown endure to all generations?" Now, this is putting money and possessions in agriculture terms, because that was how the people made a living during this time in the Bible. So we need to substitute flocks with money and possessions. But these verses, they're capturing the tension that we find when it comes to managing finances. There's always these current needs that we're facing, and then there's these future needs, some of which we can see, some of which we don't even know are coming. And so how do we make a plan to budget for both the here and now and the future? Well, here's a template that can help us with making a plan that factors in this tension that we're seeing in these verses here. It helps to think of our budget in these four categories. One is income. 2 is giving, 3 is saving, 4 is spending. Now, Pastor Matt talked about the first two categories last week and how we can be faithful in our work and to generate income, and then giving to church as well. So let's take a look at the next two categories of the budget. And as we're looking at this, I want you to think 10, 10, 80. Right? So we have our income, and then we have 10% giving, 10% saving, 80% goes towards spending. Now, some of you are going to be more natural savers. Others are going to be more natural spenders, right? I'm a natural saver, and so I look at these percentages and I think I could squeeze out another 5 or 10% out of the spending and put it in the savings so that's 20% and 70%. But others of you, right, if you're a spender, you're thinking, 80%. I think I could squeeze another 5% out of saving and put it in the spending, right? We all have different orientations when it comes to money. We have these natural tendencies to either spend or to save. Neither is better one than the other, as long as we are faithful to do what is right with our finances. So it's helpful for us to know, are we a spender or a saver? Because that's going to show our natural tendencies that we have towards money. And if we're going to be wanting to do it the wise way, then we need to know, are we going to be more natural, hold on to it and not use it for good? Or are we going to be natural to spend it all and then not have some later when emergencies might happen or when retirement comes? Now, as you look at these categories for a budget, notice the order. We get paid in income, then give our 10% tithe, then save 10%, and then spend the 80%. It's in this order because if we put spending at the top and then what we had left over for giving and saving, we're not going to have much, if anything, left over for those categories. So we want to keep it in the right order as we are making our plans when it comes to budgeting our money. And God gives us help with building the right perspective on saving. In Proverbs 13:11, it says, "Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it." You see, the goal with this budget is to gather little by little and grow your wealth slowly over time. That's God's way. Faithfulness and wisdom paired together lead to growing our wealth. So what are some ways that we can do that in the savings category? Well, some ways to grow our wealth is, one, retirement, right? We want to grow that so we're ready in the future when it's time to not work anymore and make an income that way. 2 is investments. Maybe a percentage of your savings category goes towards investments. Another thing is an emergency fund, wealth doesn't last forever. Emergencies happen. There's just things that are going to break the budget. And so we need an emergency fund there so it doesn't completely stop our progress and stop us from making progress towards our goals. Another thing in the saving category is cars, right? Big purchases that we know are coming up in the future. We want to put those in our savings category as much as we can so that then we can pay cash for those vehicles when it's time to buy one and we're not stuck in bondage to debt. College, weddings, other things that could be coming up. The goal in savings is, okay, let's build wealth, and then there's some long-term savings goals that we need to have to be able to pay cash for things when we get to them in the future. So say you're thinking, okay, I have a nice car right now, but in about 10 years, I'm going to need another one, and I think about $24,000 will be enough to get a good car for what I need. Okay, so if I save $200 a month for the next 10 years, I'll have that $24,000 to buy that new car when it comes, right? It's not easy to do to not touch that money, but if we can get disciplined in how we are managing our money, we can do it the wise way like God is. We're going to build our wealth, and it's just going to build and build and build over time. There's also some helpful things to consider in the spending category. We want to make sure to budget for these types of things. One is needs and bills, right? 1 Thessalonians 4:12 says, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. This is talking about we have a personal responsibility to take care of our own responsibilities and take care of ourselves. So we need to budget for our needs and our bills to make sure that we can take care of those things. Now, there's times where a burden comes up and it's too much, and God talks about that as well and helping one another in those types of situations. But the norm is we're taking care of our own needs and bills. Another thing we want to do is to budget for gaining wisdom and skills. Proverbs 3:13 through 15 gives us some perspective on spending money to gain wisdom and skills. Take a look at what it says. It says, blessed is the one who finds wisdom and the one who gets understanding, for the gain from her is better than gain from silver, and her profit better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her. So here it's comparing wisdom to jewels and riches, and it's saying wisdom is better than that. So we want a budget to be able to grow in our skills, maybe an education program like a advanced degree or some sort of a training program at church or a conference where we can learn more about God and his ways. Another thing we want to budget for is margin. Ephesians 5:15 says, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise. Budget for a miscellaneous category that kind of catches the areas where we forget to budget or unexpected expenses come up. So then our whole budget's not ruined, but because we have this miscellaneous category that catches a lot of those expenses. And then another thing to budget for is enjoyment, right? You spenders are going to love this one. 1 Timothy 6:17 says, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. This verse is reminding us, trust in God, but also remember, he provides everything for you to enjoy. So budget for entertainment, budget for fun. For you savers, then it gives you a license to spend money and not feel guilty. For you spenders, it gives you even more fun knowing the money's there to spend as we go out to have fun and do some entertainment. So this gives us a general plan for budgeting. Give, save, spend. In that order to help us to keep this tension of the needs that we have right now and the needs that we're going to have in the future. And once you've made your plan, the wise follow God's ways with money, by ensuring that they are living on less than they make. Take a look at Proverbs 6:6-8. It says, "Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways, and be wise. Without having any chief officer or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest." The plan that we make is only words on the page unless we actually do it. And the ant here, the ant gets things done. They actually do the hard work when it's not harvest time, so that when harvest time comes, they have food and they're going to be taken care of. And that's what we need to do with a budget, right? We need to do the work month in, month out to keep track of what's going on. Are we staying on track? Are we saving what we said we were going to save, so that we can have the money that we need for the future things that are coming up and have the money for the needs right now. And if you have multiple bank accounts or a couple people working out of the same account, it can be difficult to keep track of the transactions. I learned this the hard way not long after college. I didn't write a lot of checks in college, and then after college I started writing more, and I wasn't keeping good records or track or of the checks. I forgot to write one into my financial software system, and a check cleared that I forgot to write down, and I had a check outstanding for rent that I needed to not clear in the next couple of days, because if it did, it was going to bounce like a rubber band. I was panicked. Fortunately, it all worked out, but I was scared to really want to closely monitor my budget and my expenses from that point on. And so there's many ways that we can keep track of our budget. Here's some budget tracking options that could be helpful to you. One is Excel spreadsheet. You can write every transaction that you make and put it on a spreadsheet and manually track it. That way, this is labor intensive and you might forget to write something down like I did. So you might want a different option. Another good option could be cash envelopes for your spending categories. My wife and I, we did this for a few years, and it was really helpful. If we needed groceries from the grocery store, we'd go to the place in the cabinet where the cash was, we'd get that envelope, we'd go to the grocery store. This helped us to stay within our budget and to keep track of what we were spending. Another thing that you could do to track is use a software like Quicken, or there's lots of options out there that will download transactions from your bank and keep it on your computer. Or you might want to do a phone or web-based application like Every Dollar, that's from Ramsey, or you need a budget. These types of apps, they make it really easy to set budgets, and then as transactions come in, you just categorize them into that budget. And it really helps you to keep track, especially if you've got multiple people using the same accounts or using the same budget. An app like this helps you get real-time information as you are trying to stay on top of your budget. It's really important to follow through with the budgets that we make. If we don't follow through with keeping the budget, then the urgency of the needs and wants today are going to rob us from preparing for the future. So we need to keep track, and then when we are driving to our favorite coffee shop or driving by it and we want the coffee so bad, but we're out of that budget for the month, we need to keep that perspective, keep that discipline, and remember what the ant did. Work and plan, and we will be prepared for the future. And then one more way to be wise and follow God's ways with money is by staying away from debt. Proverbs 22:7 says, "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender." Now, the Bible doesn't completely ban debt entirely, but it gives strong warnings about debt. And so we want to be really careful before we enter into debt, right? If you're going to buy a house, then you're going to need to get a mortgage, right? Not many of us could pay cash for a house. So we're going to need to get a mortgage and go into debt to get that house. But that could be a really wise decision to go into debt to get the house if it's something you can afford. But we just need to know the reality is we're tied to that lender now until the loan is paid off. They own us in some ways. And that's the reality with car loans and credit cards, and is that they own us as we have to pay them back for whatever it is that we borrowed. And so the goal is to take debt off the table as much as possible, stay away from it, and then move forward with paying for things with the cash that we have. That's the biblical principle that we see. Now today we have talked a lot about the ideal budget. We want to track that budget and stay on top of it. We want to stay away from debt. We've looked at the ideal today because we want to show this is the wise way to handle our finances. And this gives us a goal to work towards if we're not ready to be at that point yet. Because the reality is a lot of us in the church today, we're not at this point where we're in the ideal situation with finances right now. Maybe you just can't make those percentages work out and be able to pay all your needs and obligations right now. I get that, especially with inflation. I mean, the cost of things have just skyrocketed, and so those percentages could be way out of whack and just not attainable right now for you. We also live in a culture that continues to tell us to gratify our spending desires now and pay for it later, and so many people have probably made decisions to do that, to go into credit card debt. I looked up California, and the average credit card debt per household right now is $9,191. So whenever we look at God's word in areas like finances and we see God's ideal that we're striving towards, then we see where we are at. There's always going to be this gap of where we want to be and where we're at. And it can be discouraging. But I don't want anybody to walk away from this feeling discouraged. I want you to see the hope in what we've looked at today. If you're on track with your finances, keep going. Make some adjustments and as you need to, and experience the blessing that comes from living life God's way. But if you're in debt up to your eyeballs, then I want to say there is hope and there is a way forward for you. Many people at CIV have dug themselves out of major debt. They're now walking in financial freedom or working towards financial freedom. And we at CIV, we would love to help you through that type of a situation if that's where you find yourself today. There's not going to be any judgment from us if you want to reach out for help. Our attitude is that it's by God's grace that we've been able to choose God's way with finances, and we want to help you to choose His way as you go forward. Many times it helps to have someone to come alongside and coach you through situations like this, right? You see God's ideal, you see where you are, it's hard to see, how do I get there? What are the steps that I take to get there? Well, the key is to just get out of the cycle that you're in. Get out of the cycle of debt. Start to change your perspective and your values, and the behavior is going to follow that as you say, I am going to handle my finances the wise way instead of being stuck and in bondage to all this debt. Imagine a church that takes what we've talked about seriously, walking in financial freedom instead of bondage. A church enjoying the blessings that God has given them and ready to give to needs as they arise. That is what God wants for us, and we can be that type of church as we live life God's way in the area of finances. And in order to live life God's way in this area, it helps to take next steps, right? Maybe you're not ready to go all the way to be in the ideal situation, but you can take a little step forward. Maybe you're able to save 1% right now. You want to take another step and put it up to 2%. and adjust your percentages somewhere else. So let's look at some next steps that you might want to take. The first is to revise or make a new budget using the biblical principles. We've seen the ideal now. How close can we get to the ideal, and how can we move towards that? Another next step is to diligently track my budget by fill in the blank. Do you need to try one of those apps we talked about? Do you need to figure out, get on the same page with a spouse? Or do you need to talk to somebody and say, can you provide some accountability for me and just ask me how my finances are going so that I can track it and stay on track with living life God's way in this area? Another next step is schedule a meeting with someone to discuss your current financial situation and how to move towards God's way. Get some coaching. Talk to somebody. If you don't know who to talk to, write on the back of the connection card, the digital connection card. You can write on there in the prayer request box, because there's not a comments box. Write in there that you want to meet with somebody, and we'll make sure that happens. And then a final next step is join the Financial Peace University group. That's going to be a series of meetings of ongoing coaching where you can build a budget together. You can look at how to get out of debt. There's so much good that can happen in that group if that's something that you need. Why don't you join that? God has given us so many verses on money because he knows it has such a big impact on our life. He knows that our hearts are tied to our money and our possessions, and he wants to help us to live a life of freedom, to build wealth. So let's pray and ask that we can do that moving forward. God, we thank you so much for your perspective on money and how you don't want us to get stuck in bondage to the lender, but you want us to walk in freedom. I pray, Lord, that you would help us each to identify specific ways that we can move closer to your ideal for us right now. I pray that you would show us how to do that. If we need to schedule a meeting with somebody, give us the courage to be open and honest about where we're at, and ask that they help us to start taking some steps forward, to get out of that bondage and start stepping into freedom in this way. We ask, Lord, for your help. In Jesus' name, amen.